you know, in the 80s, they started just building prisons in all these rural areas. And they basically created an economic base for, poor white people who didn't have any opportunities of employment. And they created that by building all these prisons in these very rural areas. You can go to state, and the brothers will have the same conversation of where the prisons were at, how far they were away from home, who the majority of the officers were, and how that created an economic base for them in their community. Like these prisons built up towns because of the economics that they brought into them based on our bodies. And so I remember when I got my first job in prison, and I realized I was getting paid 17 cents an hour. I went and did the research, like how is this legal? Like, anybody anywhere else, that's considered a sweatshop. So I did the research, and I realized that the loophole in the 13th Amendment, which was the amendment that was supposed to free our people, it has a clause in it that says, nobody should be subject to involuntary servitude except those duly convicted of a crime. So for that reason, in some states, you don't get paid at all. But you're getting 17 cents, 23 cents an hour. And then what happened was these big businesses started coming in and exploiting the free labor, and they would pay a little bit more. But then when you get out, those same businesses wouldn't hire you. And so, if you always follow the money, you'll understand that in this country, we built more prisons in the last 30 or 40 years than we built universities. The saddest thing for me walking out of prison is the prison I left from in Michigan on the east side of Detroit called Mount Correctional Facility. I went to a school to speak to kids and to learn what was happening at that school about a week or so after I got out. The school was in worse condition than the prison I just left.
Wow.
And so when you think about the way we're not voting, so we can't dictate where our monies are sent. So that's another aspect of voting, right? When you fail to vote, they vote to dump more money in the prisons instead of the schools right in your own backyard. So it impacts us on all these different levels. But that was sickening to walk into a school that's dilapidated, the books are outdated, and these children are trying to learn in this environment. Yet in the prison, and not saying that prisons should be in bad condition, but it shows where the investment was at, that they're more likely to invest in holding us captive than actually educating us to liberate us.
So because you make so much money, and everybody knows about these organizations like ALEC that have all these different corporations that are involved in ALEC that have basically a PAC that is involved with Congress and in the Congress's ears, so they can vote on certain things because they got to get food that comes in. They got to get prison, they got to get all these different things that the prisoners are making for you at cheap labor, basically, like you said, a sweatshop that's making these big Fortune 500 companies so much money. Do you believe that prisons actually want to rehabilitate you, or they want to make you better prisoners so they can recycle you?
Let's be clear, man, that the prison did not and I can't speak for Yusef, but I'm pretty sure I'm accurate in this. The prison didn't rehabilitate us. Like, we were both lucky to be literate and lucky to have incredibly dope men around us who challenged us to grow. The prison, especially back then, it started off with rehabilitation. You can get college, and they took all that out. Like, America's favorite president, Bill Clinton, and Biden, and they passed the most reprehensible crime bill that stripped Pell Grants from prisons and took a lot of the rehabilitative programs out. So it was up to us to educate ourselves. And actually, I prefer that model because we were getting the right information. I was getting Malcolm X instead of Christopher Columbus. You know what I'm saying? I was getting Assata Shakur, and I'm getting all these books, Great Men of Color by J.A. Rogers and, and Van Sertima and Soledad Brothers and books like that. That actually empowered me to understand that I was valuable and that I can add value to society. But the prison didn't rehabilitate us. Like, we had to put that work in.
Yeah, and then for California, I think, they added the R to California Department of Corrections and rehabilitation. They added rehabilitation to the title of corrections, right? So, I mean, they claim to have concern for rehabilitation. They may have made a way later on under other governors to bring more education back, which we had lost. And then that's when the college education came back. But like Shaka said, they did away with all that stuff during Bill Clinton's administration. And we didn't have anything, even computers. We couldn't access a computer internet. In most prisons, you still can't access the internet unless unless you're in a federal prison. But as far as state prisons, we was totally behind. It was literally living in the dark ages, trying to educate ourselves. So like, to Shaka's point, we pretty much educated ourselves. We had access to ordering books. Our parents, our loved ones, if we had family, we can get books like that, or we can order the books based on our PIA money, what they call it here, prison industry, right? Mm-hmm. Our dollar an hour that we make and save up and buy a couple of books. It might take a month or two to get 2 books, but it'll be worth it, at least while you're in there.
Hey Mike, I want to speak on this before we run out of time. I want to speak on about we really need reform because they shouldn't be able to use your juvenile record when you get to adult, to keep you in prison. Because my cousin been in, my first cousin Michael Polk been in since 1977. You know what I'm saying? He's still in California prison. Done a tour all over. He's still in. He's still trying to get out. You know what I mean? But they keep using his juvenile record, to hold him down. And they keep just using it every time they go to parole board. So we got to bring awareness to that too, and try to pass a law that you can't use your juvenile record, to hold you in prison, because he's been in, like I said, that was my idol since 1977. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And I got to try to get Michael Polk out. You know what I mean? So, and that's why I'm saying his name, because I love him to death. He probably watching. You know what I mean? And I ain't seen him since 20 years. I mean, I ain't seen him since 1977. You know what I mean? So we really gotta change that law about them using our juvenile record, to hold us in prison. So I just want to speak on that.
No, well,
we have a lifer lawyer on our board too. So I would have them reach out to our organization as well, because one of our board members is a lifer attorney. She actually fought to get me out of prison. She was my attorney when I went to the parole board. So she's her name is Katie Gilbert, and she's fabulous, and she's been working with lifers for years. And a lot of my brothers that got out of prison used her as an attorney because she specialized in lifer issues. So could you say her information again, Yusef? Yeah, she's based out of San Francisco, so she's all the way up. She's up in Quentin, Soledad, and all those spots all the time, and down this way. Her name is Katie Gilbert. She should be pretty easy to find. You can find her out there in San Francisco. She's based out of San Francisco, but she specializes in lifer attorney issues. So
okay, we got about 3 more minutes, man, but I want to get this in because this is really important because we've heard everything, and you guys are 2 wonderful, exceptional human beings, whatever. You made it, you rehabilitated yourself, you're making a difference being positive in society. But we know how a lot of people that have never had people in prison view you guys. They look at you as a convict. They look at you as a prisoner. They're looking at you and saying, well, why should we feel sorry for you? You committed a crime. We don't care how you're getting treated in prison. We don't care what happens to you after you get out of prison. Crystal Clear, one of our commenters, said, how do we remove the stigma, though, and fear associated with working with recently incarcerated individuals? How do you convince people that even though you made a mistake, you're human and you deserve this second chance and you're not a danger to society? How do you convince them of that?
So I just started recently. I started a website called Redeemed Soul, and it's Soul, S-O-L-E, and it's an aggregation of all these incredible system-impacted led organizations, meaning that all these organizations are led by people who were at one time in prison. Continue to own our own story is one of the reasons I wrote the book, because I didn't need somebody to tell my story. I needed to tell it myself. Mm-hmm. And so we've been consistently over the years, like even now with this conversation, like this conversation wasn't the same 5 years ago. So there's been a lot of incremental progress. We've got celebrities involved, we got politicians involved, we got system impacted people involved. And, and it starts with really loving on your people and loving your people enough to say, look, when you come home, I want you to stay home. I want you healthy and whole. Mm-hmm. I'm gonna do my part to make sure that those things are in place for you to come home healthy and whole, because these are the facts. I don't really care about what people are afraid of. The facts are the facts. Over 98% of people who go to prison are coming home. Mm-hmm. And we need to decide that if men and women are coming home, we need to decide whether we want healthy and whole human beings coming home, or we want people who coming home who have been broken by the system. And so it's a choice of cowardice or courage. And it's really simplified in that way, because we have enough examples of us who have come out and not only lived and survived, like we thriving, you know what I mean? Like I'm thriving at an amazing level, you know what I mean? So, and there's so many of us that are, and I don't say that to knock people who aren't thriving, but the dedication, the hard work, what people have poured into me is a result of, you know, the effort that I put forward. And you see the fruits of labor when people pour into you. Had nobody poured into me, I probably would be one of that 70% that go back to prison.
Real quick on that though, do you hate it when people use you as an example? Somebody says, you know what, hey, if he came out of prison, he made it. What's wrong with you? How come you can't do it? Do you hate it when people do that?
But I hate when they do it in that manner, because what's important for people to understand is that the average reading level in prison is 3rd grade. I came in, I grew up in the streets, but I also was smart in school. So I had the privilege of being literate. And then I also have the skill set as a writer. So my pathway was a little bit different. But the thing is, I could not have done this by myself. I've had support every step of the way. I've had people who I didn't know from a can of paint who love me and love what I represent, that get behind me in my work consistently for the 10 years I've been out.
And I was, sorry.
You said we got about 45
Yeah, I know.
seconds.
I just was going to say I was reading at a 4th grade level when I went in there, and I started educating myself. So it's about trust. And I feel like once you get out and prove yourself and you give it back to the community, you develop that trust. It happens naturally. And that's what's happened for me, because I got a lot of